a little bit about our services first, and talk about some of the things that we see in the Counseling Center in terms of clinical presentations and how that relates to students in your classroom. So the Counseling Center is located in Skip Hall, which is on the corner of South Willard and Main Street. We have 5 clinicians, but we just actually hired a new clinician who's starting April 26th. Sorry, her name is April Menzer. She's starting September 26th. And she will be doing more clinical case management, helping us form groups, and doing a lot of reach out to the community, and also managing the wait list. So usually around week 5 or 6, we start generating a wait list. But in terms of service, we do group, individual, and educational outreach for the college campus. We primarily do individual sessions. I would say the majority of the students that we see are experiencing right now, it's adjusting to college, roommate issues. But predominantly, students that we are seeing are coming with symptoms of anxiety and depression. Anybody else have anything to add about that? Maggie, do you want to talk a little bit about our groups?
Sure thing. So we have a group program that has been active for several years. And so one of the aims of the group program is not only to bring students together to collaborate, to normalize some of the things they're experiencing, but also to help manage our wait list and the demand on their services by having many students in one place at one time. So every semester we generate a list of ideas for group counseling options based on the clinical presentations and the needs that are coming through at that time. And we typically offer between 1 and 3 groups per semester. Some are, more of an educational or kind of workshop, psychoed bent. Some have more of a deeper kind of therapeutic component with a set group of students that will remain through the course of a semester. So we have a combination of groups, and we're really hopeful that this new hire, April, will continue to foster that program, help that to grow, especially to meet the demand for services, which, as you can imagine, is high. And I wanted to mention just one other service that we offer, I would say, in the realm of individual counseling, but it's a little different. It's called Let's Talk. And it may be beneficial to know this piece as you're working with students, because Rebecca happened to mention as we were chatting before this call began formally that one question that does come up from faculty is in interacting with students, and perhaps a faculty member might suggest that a student seek counseling services, but then there's some hesitation on the student's part about engaging in that. And so Let's Talk is a way to connect with a counselor for 20 minutes, and it's a consultation. It's via Zoom. It's in the evenings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And it's just a very brief introduction to what we do, or a brief interaction to problem solve about a minor concern a student may have. So especially for students that are not familiar with counseling or have some concerns or worries about that, which we understand, please encourage them to utilize that resources and information on our website about how to sign up for that. So that's another offering that we have this semester.
Just in terms of volume, for your perspective, last year we saw 526 unique students, and we had 4,200 and something. So the center is very, very busy. People who are not here, we also usually have between 2 or 3 graduate interns, and they help manage some of that workload. But initially because they're new interns, they initially get some of the lower level type clinical presentations. So we do also have 2 interns a semester. Any questions about the counseling center specifically, or any questions about mental health on campus? We're happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone on the call have a question? Something you've encountered, a sticky situation? Now's your opportunity to ask about preventative measures, proactive strategies.
I can talk a little bit about something that we see a lot of, and I'm sure professors can identify this is students that maybe are caught in the avoidance cycle. So students who maybe feel too anxious to start doing some homework, and then as a result sort of don't do it, feel embarrassed and ashamed, so they don't go to class, and that cycle quickly spirals. And I think what happens frequently is we see those students 2, 3, 4 weeks later, and at that point, you know, the clinical need is high because they have been avoiding pretty much everything, and then digging out of a hole, the academic piece is really challenging for those students.
Yeah, is there anyone on the call that would be willing to unmute and share maybe a strategy that you use, recognizing that students sometimes get themselves in a hole? Do you create pathways or put anything in your syllabus that helps a student figure out a pathway out of that hole? And if not, is that something that you would all be interested in exploring together? Christopher, please.
Yeah, I would love to know how to put that in a syllabus specifically, like what exactly I should say. That makes sense.
Yeah, would any of you have some advice for a faculty member who would want to have some language around that in their syllabus?
I haven't thought about that. I was just thinking about a conversation that I had with a student recently, and I wish I could, off the top of my head, just think of some great wording for you, but one thing that really struck me was the student really longing for it to be normalized that happens. And I was thinking that, you know, if there's a way to be transparent right off the bat, you know, in those first initial classes, or even now, you know, week 3 or on the syllabus going forward, that there may be times in the semester where they get stuck, and that you would expect that they would come to you to talk to you about that situation, and not just about the content that they're struggling with, obviously, but the fact that they're having trouble talking about it. That I think having that put out there, that it's really a thing and it happens pretty frequently, and that you can work with them and we could work with them kind of in concert together, that really that transparency, I think, would help bring the students' guard down, and recognizing that that they can get help, and the sooner the better.
Yeah, thank you. Dana, I think you had something to add.
I feel like I generally start by trying to help strategize with them how they can kind of dig themselves out of the hole so it doesn't keep spiraling worse. So I might spend a little bit of time with them looking at the assignments that are overdue and kind of giving them like strategies or hacks, like telling them, hey, if you put in C quality work for this assignment, that's still way better than the F you've got. So kind of like giving them permission to hack the system a little bit in ways that I feel like it's still okay for the course. And then I've also referred students to academic counselors who have more time to spend with students strategizing. And like last time I spent a bunch of time with a student sent her to an academic counselor, and she ended up dropping my class. But that was the thing that made the most sense for her to dig herself out of the hole. So I found that really valuable.
Thanks, Dana. Anybody else? Don't be shy. Something you've tried. I mean, even to say, I tried this and it didn't work out that great, could still help us maybe collectively brainstorm together what might be a good solution.
I think to tag off what Maggie was just saying, I was with a student yesterday, and she was feeling pretty overwhelmed, second year game studio student, feeling pretty overwhelmed by the amount of work that they'd already received. And there's a couple of people stayed after class and were talking to the professor, and this one person said, I don't think I belong here, like this is gonna be too hard. And then the professor, I don't know who the professor was, but said, does anyone else feel like they have imposter syndrome? And everyone raised their hand. So it's really like validating that feeling, right? Like you do belong here, this is challenging work, but you can do it, right? But I don't know who the professor was, but I just felt like it was an awesome in the moment intervention that's made that my client feel just like so much better.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. Thank you. I will share that I often do, not often, I would like to do this more, but some faculty members invite me to come into their classroom, sometimes week 3, week 5, midterm time, and at the end to get student feedback on what the students are actually experiencing that maybe feels a little harder to say to a professor who's giving you a grade, but is willing to share with me. And then I kind of curate that and collaborate with the faculty member to go through some of that feedback in a really like growth mindset sort of way. We don't focus on, any unsolicited criticisms that come from a student or something like that. We sort of clean that up and do really productive feedback. And one of the things that I found that students regularly say meant a lot to them is when faculty members choose to do something different in their assessment process and their assigning of grades early on in the semester. So an example of that would be that nothing really counts toward your grade. You're going to get a grade assigned to a paper or a project. You're going to get the feedback on that paper or project, but it is not going to go in the grade book until after week 3. Until after week 3, nothing counts toward your final grade. And that gives the student an idea of the level and quality of standard that you have for those students. And it gives them a chance to practice, make mistakes, get it wrong, get some feedback, try it out, try again, before you start actually saying, that's gonna go right in the book and count toward your final. So, our students are basically saying, let us practice before, so it's a formative assessment rather than something that's summative.
I'm trying to understand the conversation, but I guess I have some related experience. I had one student last semester. I'm teaching advanced programming. She took into the programming, but she wasn't ready that much. So first couple of weeks, assignments grades are so bad. So she looked like she's gonna fail. And I invited her for a talk, and then she ignored. Actually, she couldn't do anything. But later on, she started to pick up. But the last assignments are pulling her down because she missed a lot of assignments. I invited her, give me a new deadlines for yourself, and I'm gonna give you resubmission to these assignments, but little bit penalty, not much. It will save you, but I'm not gonna give you the, or treat you in week 8 because you missed the assignment in week 1. She recovered it, and I am applying this to all of my students who wants to take advantage of it. It brings me some load. But, saving one starfish is important for me. So out of 8, maybe 6 students I'm dealing, out of 40 students, I have maybe 5, 6 students in this situation I need to reach out. Not everybody is responding positively. Some people already gave up. But only when I say 2 or 3, and then they said, you refreshed my, trust in this major. I was thinking this is not my major. I am in the wrong place. But I regain my trust, and I'm gonna be, continuing the study. That is, I apply. Very similar to Rebecca, what she said. But I'm applying all the grades at the very beginning, so they can see where they are going. This is the dashboard. And giving this kind of small or big, lab or just quizzes every week, they have like a dashboard, and they can have many inputs, many data, so they know where they are navigating, or the engine is whether good or bad. It is, too hot, or need to change oil, whatever it is. So they have dashboard. Otherwise, they are driving something which will break in the middle of maybe at the end of the semester, but they have no chance to recover because they didn't know what's going on. So this is what one practice I do, and I see it is effective. Just want to share that.
Thank you, Murad. That's great. Any other comments or questions?
I have a question for something else, this is something I'm working out right now. Especially in my first classes, they are so antsy and distractible. Yesterday, I had to have a conversation about like boundaries in the classroom. Like I said, like you're not allowed to use your phone, no social media, no emails. If you need to text or call, you need to leave the classroom. I told them that they're allowed and encouraged to find something that they can do with their hands that won't distract their brains. So they can draw, they can knit, they can do something like that. And I was even going to bring in some markers and some paper so they could just go and help themselves some markers and they could draw. But mostly I'm just kind of curious what other people have done. Like it's a range. I have some students who really struggle with sitting still. Some students have medical reasons that help them struggle with sitting still. Like I have one student who's transitioning, so she's on these crazy like estrogen right now. So she was like, sometimes she just gets these wild mood swings. So with her, I told her, if you need to take a walk, just take a walk and come back when you're feeling better. But I guess just in general, like more tips about how to handle students who are not regulated in the classroom, unable to sit still and pay attention and contribute.
Thanks, Dana.
You want to tackle that?
I have one idea off the top of my head. I mean, depending on, you know, if you're finding that the general tenor of a particular classroom has a lot of that kind of energy, that depending on the length of the class, even recognizing, can we all just, you know, we're about 35 minutes in, let's all stand up, take a moment, shake it off. And vice versa of, you know, let's actually just have a moment to, if it seems like there's a lot of energy that needs to come down after that, of just saying, and now let's just be quiet for a moment. And if, you know, let's notice, you know, 5 things that we can see in the classroom, 4 things we hear, you know, and just finding a way to shift the energy and then say, okay, great, let's refocus. Here's what we need to get done. I think that especially this first year class, as we all know, the pandemic, some of the things, the skills that they would have locked in a couple of years ago, they didn't get. And so it may seem basic to us that students could sit still through, you know, the length of a class, but I think that there's a real gap there now. So again, reminding of time limits can be really helpful. If we're going to take the first half hour to work on this, we'll take 5 minutes after that to stretch or whatever it might be, and then it'll be another 45 minutes of this. And it seems basic, but reminding students there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to something can actually be really helpful.
I appreciate the no phones, no,
Yeah.
I mean, that's how a classroom should be. So it's good to hear that there's some boundaries around technology.
Yeah, and I think, and they actually were quite receptive. I was a little worried about some pushback, but I started to feel like maybe they were kind of just looking for those boundaries, and that maybe the fact that I hadn't sent them was making them kind of feel like they could push against them because they were kind of getting away with it. So they did seem pretty receptive. I just want to make sure I'm providing other outlets because I can just see them. They're literally like shaking in their seats. And it's a 75-minute class. It's not what I would consider to be incredibly long.
Dana, I do have some fidgets in my office that I'm happy to loan out, or if you want to come up and have a chat with me, we could talk about maybe how many of something that you would like. I'd be happy to order those for you so that you could have a little basket that you take with you to class as well. I think the markers are great, but you know, also squishy balls and all the
Fidget spinner.
little fidgets and stuff. It would be great if we had those in every classroom.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Thank you. I'd love to have a little basket of like stuff for them to play with.
Okay, just come up to the CLT. I've got some. I'll share with you.
Or Dana, my take, I mean, generally, this when I am requesting something, I try not to be that much harsh. If I cannot regulate it, and I lose the authority in the class, because then you request and some people are not listening. So like government makes sometimes law and they don't enforce it, then government loses the respect in time because they are not following you will say this is one another law. So what I'm doing is I request kindly, during the no text, no music listening, anything, and everything should be related to my class. Because I'm teaching computer science, they have screen. I said no gaming behind, because they open another tab and they game. And what I do is I say, I'm going to teach. What I teach is there's a lab coming. And I give this carrot, kinda. If you listen to me, you don't need to go home and work anything. And then you can finish this lab home and you forget about my class. So I give them some carrot. And otherwise they will waste their time listening this, this voice, which is not the best one. So I said, just focus and learn and ask. That is helping me, and I say this is a useful class and it will help you, and this is your profession and you will use it in this area. And so that is a little bit, this carrot and stick. If they don't listen, they will punish themselves later on. So yeah, that is what I do. I say the music is only possible if you are working on project and you want to be just focusing. That's okay. You can use it, but other than that, don't use your phone.
Cool. Thank you. So I guess I might ask too, because I know there's a wait list for counselors, and it's kind of like my go-to to send students there if I see them like really experiencing like depression or anxiety. I'm generally, if it's like, if I see, I'll just notice, I note a lot of students who haven't figured out how to work with their ADHD yet. So I tend to send them to academic advisors. But going back to the depression and anxiety, so if because I know that the wait list grows pretty quickly, I guess what we could send them to is maybe the Let's Talk, or is there something else that we should send them to?
So, good question. I think one of the biggest rumors on campus is that we always have this huge wait list and you can never get in. That's not true. We have a triage and intake system set up so students can actually walk in any day and be seen that same day. And so essentially each one of us has a triage day where we do 2 or 3 intake appointments, but then keep slots open to manage the walk-in traffic. And what we do when the walk-ins come in is depending on what their clinical need is, if they require ongoing counseling, we absorb them, right? But if it's something that maybe is lower level, maybe doesn't meet the clinical criteria for an immediate intervention, they do go on the wait list. And but again, if students have significant clinical needs, they can always get in and access services.
Okay, thank you.
I would also add that the students on the wait list are still being tracked periodically, so we'll check in with them, see how they're doing. They always leave with a list of resources available to them. There's also the 24/7 line that's available to Champlain students specifically.
Maybe they probably don't know about that. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so that's a service that we contract out, and it's available, like I said, to all students. It's a 24/7 line. I think we have it labeled as crisis services, but really anyone can use it whenever they need it. It's a place where they can get connected to a clinician and, discuss strategies to manage anxiety, vent, and if they are in a crisis, then that is the service that they would probably want to get connected to. But the service then tags us, and so we're aware if the student has contacted this 24-hour line, and then we can reach out and offer a session with them in person, check in, make sure they're still doing well. So a student that lands on the wait list isn't necessarily like totally disconnected from our services. We'll still try to keep a pulse on them and make sure that they can at least carry forward for the next couple of weeks. And we try really hard to connect them to outside sources as well.
And we're really hopeful with this new position that this person's gonna be able to really like care for those students on the wait list. And I'd say around like week 9 or 10, our wait list could be 20-ish. I mean, so we do have weekly connections with those students, but now with starting this new position, we really feel like it's gonna be a much better way to manage the wait list. So we have a better idea of what's going on clinically for those students. A lot of the time, those students are just struggling with academic motivation, right? Which is, can be clinically significant. It could indicate issues with depression and or anxiety, but those are sort of, in our minds, those are the lower level cases in terms of their clinical needs, as opposed to someone who might be experiencing suicidal ideation. So that's sort of how we track it. And to Isabella's point, we always do, we are in touch with them about resources. And a lot of times we refer them to academic coaching as well.
That's great. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wonder I would love to hear from some of you if it would be beneficial, and if yes, what some of the pathways or systems we could put into place whereby a student is receiving tips and strategies and encouragement from you that then faculty and the coaching staff at the Smart Space, like we're all using the same language and we're all reminding. So if a student comes and gets support, it would be great if a faculty member since they're not trained in this, but if they had language that they could repeat or say, let's remember whatever it is that you've kind of taught them or tools that you've given them, that they could ask the student to employ that tool in the moment or something, if that would sort of keep that student going rather than this big disconnect, like they're just white knuckling it until they can get out of the class and run down here to you to deal with that situation. Maybe there's a way that we can keep that to the front of their mind or remind them of the tools that they do have. I wonder if you could speak to some of that. Has this ever been discussed?
I don't know, I think each student is so uniquely different, and I'm not entirely sure there's sort of here's the canned say this and then they'll be okay. But that being said, I do think that if you're with a student who you really are concerned about how they're doing in that moment, and you are thinking like, wow, I really hope the next thing they do is getting to the counseling center, is that for them in that moment, it really may be about just recognizing that they're white knuckling it right there. Mm-hmm. And that it's not, they probably just need to hear, it really looks like you're struggling right now. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you're, if you're feeling angry. I wonder if you're feeling nervous. I wonder if you're feeling, and trying to connect on that emotional level to just say, like, and I see it. That might be, because when someone is dysregulated, they're not actually in their logical mind. You are sitting with someone who is really in their emotions. You can kind of think about it in terms of you now maybe have a 5-year-old rather than a 19-year-old, and how would you speak to them? Like, I see you, this looks like it's difficult for you right now. Sometimes asking what would be helpful, how can I help you? Knowing that oftentimes in those situations, they're not going to be able to tell you, but just acknowledging that that's where I'm coming from right now, is that I'm here to help you, is different from, like, well, you haven't turned this in, and, or if you turn this in, it'll be better. Like, trying to problem solve for them in that moment may just sort of fly over their head. So, just being able to try to tap into, and you definitely you don't have to feel like you're starting a counseling session. It's just, I see you, it looks like you're having a hard time.
What can I do?
And what can I do?
Yeah. Okay. So I love that language. Are there some, would you share any caution about saying certain things that may make a student feel uncomfortable or called out in a more public, so say it's in class. Are there some words that you should maybe avoid when saying that?
Well, I'm just thinking, like if it's one person in a group of students and you're trying to address the situation that's happening right then and there, that's challenging. I don't know, I might try to suggest that you connect with that student after class and say, hey, everything that Adrian just said, like, I noticed that, you're struggling. Can you tell me about that? And maybe offer some suggestions and just being human, right? And just being like empathetic and available. Can you guys think of anything else? Like, you've done some classroom work, David.
And just kind of going back to you all have the benefit of not having to be clinical. You get to be in a human space with your students and always keeping in mind, which I know all of you know because you work with these students every day, that they are a product of what they bring with them to the classroom. And what you're seeing, the issues run into are a result of, many times a result of that everything that they carry with them, the experiences that they've had, and just being in the space with them and being that human being that's there, be like, let me help you, can go miles for that student.
And, I don't want to speak for anyone on this call, but I will say that just from my experience and my perspective, that something that sometimes goes unsaid is that faculty members are also coming in with a lot of unregulated feelings and things that are going on, not only because they have lives outside of the college, but also, dare I say, the academic environment, especially in graduate schools, pursuing PhDs. There's a culture there that actually can be very harmful to individuals, and learning that culture and surviving in that culture means that that person in some ways absorbed and adopted some of those behaviors. And so when we as academics hear things like, just be human, in your world, that is often connected to that empathy. In the academic world, it is much more competitive. It's much more, I don't know what the word is, but it's that individualism and that survival, and I'm going to win in this moment and defend what I'm doing. And that becomes a learned behavior that sometimes comes up against someone who's struggling academically and has a need to express why. And so helping our faculty with the language, while it seems like a very intuitive thing for most of you, sometimes we have to actually learn that language and adopt it and practice it until it becomes natural.
Good reminder for us.
Yeah.
It's such different worlds. I was just thinking about your question, Rebecca, around interacting with us around specific questions. And I think in the past, our office used to be, our office used to be co-joined with accommodations or accessibility. And so we wore both hats. And so we had a lot more frequent conversation with faculty. And now the two offices are separate. And so there is a lot more of the clinical kind of confidential information that we wouldn't typically be sharing with faculty. But that being said, we are totally willing to have conversations, and it can be so beneficial because, as Adrian was talking about, the individual differences from person to person and faculty member to faculty member, and then how that faculty member engages with students or vice versa. And so as long as we have the students written permission to interact with the faculty member, then we're all for it. So, obviously to a certain extent, we're gonna abide by the idea of like minimal disclosure, like whatever's absolutely necessary to what's happening in the classroom and not beyond that. We'd be having like the conversation with the student about how we're gonna navigate those phone calls. Oftentimes it's a speaker phone call with the, with faculty member and the counselor and the student all together brainstorming, and maybe a follow-up call after that. So we're happy to do that, and it's a good reminder for us to encourage students to utilize us in that way, if possible, as an intermediary, and know that that is a possibility. Sometimes faculty members will just call us out of the blue, then we've got to check in with the student and say, hey, do I have permission to talk to this person about what and how often, and what's that going to look like? What's the goal here? But it's totally doable.
I just have to say, unfortunately, I have to go early, but thank you very much for the conversation, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Any other questions or experiences that you're having in the classroom, or?
Any ways that we can collaborate?
I think I would add something about I think I can speak for the whole group, that that oftentimes we do get students coming in who are just feeling so distressed about the academics, and that, so they might be saying, oh, I have this, and the professor did this, and now I have this, and that the message on our end is that you all want them to succeed.
Right.
And that, that you are much more open to please reach out and contact and say, I'm struggling right now. I am working with a counselor, but this is how it's impacting, and that you all want to have those conversations to say, okay, how can we help you succeed? And that you're not there to fail them, that no one enjoys failing a student. And so that on our end, it really is about helping the students stay connected with you all, and that it is a message of we're all in this together, not, they just want to make it hard, and, that, yeah.
Which is also like teaching them how to advocate.
Exactly, yeah.
Or helping them.
Yeah, make that office visit, send an email, connect, they want to support you.
It sort of goes back to the avoidance, because we will actually sit with students in our office and have them draft an email. We'll take out your computer, this is how we're going to become unstuck right now, and you are going to go to that class on Thursday.
Nice.
Because I think usually once they make the contact and they're not feeling so guilty or ashamed of, for whatever reason they've been avoiding the class, it opens the door just a little bit, it makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. And then if that professor responds to the email in the affirmative, being like, great, Joey, can't wait to see you, maybe we can catch up after class and see how we can get back on track.
Got a lot of heads nodding and a lot of thank yous, so. We have just a couple more minutes. We also don't need to stay a full hour if people feel like this was satisfying to this point. So I'm gonna sit here for an uncomfortable 7 seconds and let you all have your last final thoughts. And then please, if you want to keep the conversation going and you have some questions, please ask. Otherwise, we will close out here in just a few minutes.
I just wanted to say I really appreciated hearing the phrase digging yourself out of the hole, and hearing that that's such a common experience and such a visual way of saying it. And it certainly must be how it feels to experience it. And then hearing that that's something that I could incorporate in my syllabus directly, and then check in probably maybe halfway through the semester. I think that was really helpful for me to hear. So I appreciate it. And thank you all so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Chris. Well, I think that's our time. So if no one else has anything more to add, or any questions, or
I just say,
bright ideas?
if anyone has any individual questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. We're happy to consult on
Wonderful. Thank you. You've all been just wonderful. Thank you all for joining us today. And with that, we'll say goodbye. Have a good afternoon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca, it was great.
Just to have a chance to chat with people.
Yeah.
Good to hear the perspectives too.